Hello, I'm James Keating, and thanks for tuning in for another podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking about Red Boat Wing Chun. I'd recently watched a video where the great Joe Louis and the great Master Dan Inosanto were speaking. This was from the old days, sitting on a sofa, talking about Bruce Lee. And it made me think about certain things in my own career, in my own life. And so I thought I would share those insights. I'll try to keep this fairly brief. So some of you will probably remember, some won't, that back in around '94 in the Full Contact magazine, I was one of the first people to write about Red Boat style Wing Chun. Of course, we know Wing Chun Kung Fu had existed long before that, but the Red Boat style was quite unique. Many people had not heard about it. Well, needless to say, by me breaking the ice on that, I took quite a beating. A lot of hateful bullshit came out that was totally unnecessary from experts who simply weren't. And now here we are in the land of the future. And Red Boat Wing Chun is all over. It's a given thing. Of course, Red Boat, we all know about it now. And it's been an amazing journey because a lot of people, even to this day, will call bullshit on it. And I don't like that because it's cutting into that line of thinking that is valuable. So once again, someone gets out of the conformity line and tries to do something different, you get knocked back in. And the people who are doing it usually aren't that skillful or that knowledgeable. Just trolls out making trouble for other people, trying to bring some sort of enlightenment or knowledge out on a secondary or a tertiary level, something extra, but even that cannot be allowed by the trolls. So I haven't really had it easy with my so-called Red Boat Wing Chun. In fact, I don't teach Wing Chun, I don't teach Red Boat. What I did was just allow it to be absorbed by what I normally would do in my Kali, my JKD concepts, and things like this. So it just became a part of a greater art that I share with others. But I never, or rarely do I ever, identify it as Red Boat Wing Chun. Yet, watching that interview that I mentioned at the beginning of this, I noticed at one point where Dan said that Bruce was having everyone do forms. Forms was it. He says, I was about halfway through Silam Tao. And then Bruce came in and said, we're not doing forms anymore. We're going to change again. Back then, evidently, Bruce Lee was changing his art as he was constructing it almost weekly. And in this case, it suddenly shifted from forms to two-man exercises, drills. Well, haven't I always told everyone who would listen that Red Boat Wing Chun is not about the forms. It is about the older method of two-man forms. And that's what I learned. All the same things that are in your forms, your kata or whatever, are in the drills. But people don't seem to be able to see the benefit there. Just an alternative way of learning. So I thought it was interesting when Bruce told everyone, we're only going to be doing these drills, interactive drills now, no more forms. Well, where do you think that came from? Let's think. Where did I get the bullshit about Red Boat? Where did that come from? People say, well, you said Mr. David Harris. Well, where did Mr. David Harris get it? That was Fook Young. People say, well, who else was exposed? Try Steve Smith. Actually, many people were exposed to that in kind of a roundabout way. Anyone who trained at that dojo with David Harris, Sid Woodcock, or Fook Young would be exposed to that. So that's where I was exposed to it. That's where Bruce Lee was exposed to it, because you see, Fook Young was the cook at Ruby Chow's restaurant. Bruce Lee was a waiter in Seattle. So, of course, they hooked up. Fook Young was teaching the Red Boat style to Bruce Lee behind the scenes, way more than people realize, or way more Wing Chun than what Ip Man taught him in Hong Kong. Even William Chung and his seniors there in the Hong Kong family said, oh, that, he wasn't there that long. And Bruce Lee openly admitted around 1966, 68, in that era, Black Belt magazine, Jeet Kune Do is fencing. We just borrowed the Wing Chun matrix. It's fencing with the empty hand. This is why in his book, The Tao of Jeet Kune Do, the terms are not in Chinese, they are in French, the international language of fencing. The very name Jeet Kune Do, the intercept, that's a fencing technique or terminology, a concept of fencing. You don't see it that much in martial arts. So once again, we see fencing all over the place, but people are still in denial of it. Well, where did he come up with the Wing Chun? Well, where did he come up with the drills, I would ask back? Fukyong, the same place I did. So when we look at that video, that interview, we see a moment in time, a moment in history, not only where this man got a realization that, hey, this stuff is better, it's a faster producing, it produces ability, skill quicker than by having people go through forms. Are forms pointless? No, I love forms. I've done kata in some way or fist sets in some way all my life. But they're vague. You do them alone and they just leave you, that's it. Okay, well, what do you think this is? You get together with your homies and say, what is this? When I raise my hand here, well, if you go with the simple stuff, everything becomes, well, that's a block and that's a hit. And then he hits you and then you block. It becomes very droll and mundane. One-dimensional. When in reality, the drills are anything but one-dimensional. I've always found them to be genius. In '94, that's what I was hoping to share with people. Instead, what they shared with me is how much hatred and bullshit they have in their hearts, and how limited they are, and why no one will ever remember their names. So, there are a few out there that will always push that envelope. Bruce Lee was one of them. And perhaps Fukyong and David Harris was also one of them. We who are the spawn of that school in Seattle are representatives, but we certainly didn't come up with it. We were only students, so we were taught how to do these things, why, and actually quite well. And this is something that we need to realize, that there's alternative means to learning an art. If those options are there, why are they there? Who would do that? Well, in some instances, forms are more of a modern thing. They were not always the way to go. As we look back, two-man sets, even in Kempo, in some of the early Kempo books that Mr. Parker put up, two-man exercises. But then it slowly became not so popular. And many Sifu found out that I could keep you in my dojo another 2 years, my Kung Fu Kwun, paying me money if I taught you forms because you didn't know anything. And you're trying to remember these intricate moves. Yet at the end all, 5 years, 10 years later, you got a guy who knows the whole art, but really doesn't know shit. And yet 3 years after learning the two-man sets, you have a guy that I think knows the whole art too. And yes, he can back it up because he has the timing, he has the distance, he has everything in his mind that needs to be, because the two-man forms teach that. And they're the exact same moves, the exact same things that are in the three forms. But they're composed differently because they're for two people. And you learn quicker. You learn all the vital elements that you need as a fighter, as a teacher, as a practitioner. Versus that vague, I think this is it. Yeah, well, we do the other style of Wing Chun, instead of Wing Chun, and we do this style and that style. So everybody has some different version. Whatever, they're all based upon these same motions. So when you learn these two-man sets, you can back it up right away. You have more authority. You have more knowledge, working knowledge of the art, than those who fight and spar and do all this childish shit. So in my opinion, the Red Boat two-man set just as Bruce delineated to Dan, and Dan later spoke about in that interview, were the way to go. And where he learned them was from the same place I learned them, and that was Fukyung. He was the source for all of this. And it just went right down, just like water runs downhill. You know, be water, my friend. Well, water runs downhill. And it went right from those days right into when I was over there training. And that's why now Red Boat, and I notice now Red Boat is also, now people are saying this Red Boat, they do forms. I don't see anything about that. I see they've taken the standard Wing Chun format and just changed names and said now it's Red Boat. And I would, anytime, and you know you Wing Chun people, you're fighters. So am I. And I would love to see your Red Boat Wing Chun. I would love to touch hands with you. Is it a challenge? No. I'm not the challenger. I'm the one who's constantly been challenged by these pissant nobodies. That is why I'm doing this. That's why I'm talking. And you say, yeah, well, you're an old goat now. Yeah, I'm 70 years old. But you know, the old goat still has some horns on his head. And we'll see. That's the only way that you live in the world of Jianghu. We'll see. We'll see who comes out. So in that way, I'm trying to clarify this and say this whole Red Boat Wing Chun, some of it's bullshit, pure and simple. And some of it is magnificent, awesome. So as a shopping around for your Kung Fu sort of person, be careful with what you buy into. There's a lot of con jobs out there now. And what I see as Red Boat, not so much, maybe some, but it has a distinctive flavor, a distinctive look and taste. And I can always tell those who have trained in the real deal. Does it make you, do you think it makes you better? I don't know about better because it's the same. But it makes you better quicker and gives you a more fuller, more well-rounded knowledge than, let's just say, most Wing Chun schools based upon technique and lineage and just incredible amount of waste of time. If you're a true fighter and you want to get to the heart of it, Red Boat has that. But if you're a historian, a reenactor, go ahead and do the rest of this stuff. Put on your garb, do all your stuff. And you know what I thought was also very interesting? Most of the haters, in fact, 100% of the haters, when I did finally see their face or find out who they were, there was no one from China. There was no one of Asian descent. This was all white people. Yeah. So where do they come in trying to defend the honor? I think it's just bizarre. Bizarre, childish, and unnecessary. And this is, again, the whole of that type of world is combative, contentious, childish, ego-filled with pride, to where someone who comes in with an improved version can't even get out to teach it because you're just shut down. This is too bad. But that also means those of us who have the knowledge are going to keep it. And those who don't won't have it. So, in a way, it's a fail-safe and a punishment for the shitheads all in one. And that's what it's all about. I have it, you don't. So, in that way, I'm putting the record right the way it should be. Because for too long, since about 94, have I put up with this ridiculousness. And it's time to speak out about it. Now, of course, there'll be those that Keating is full of shit. Well, it's a two-way street, Buster. Maybe I think that about you. Or maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm on to something. Maybe it's time to wake up. Why do all the older forms, Bagua 64, you know, the two-man set and all that? Why? Why is there a two-man set? Because those are the older ones, and those are the ones you really learn from. Not from just wandering around out there, basically doing some kind of Kung Fu aerobics. See, and that's, it has to go further than that. So, I'm going to wind this one down. You'll say, boy, he was angry. Not a bit. I'm just going to drive the nail home and get it done, what I want to say. For too long, I have been quiet about this and been a humble guy. People shit on my shoes, they can expect to be eating that shit that they just put on my shoes, because that's how it works. That's the world of dragons and tigers, real life and death. You know, that is Kung Fu. Kung Fu has been turned into a novelty, a series of parlor tricks. Not in my world. In my world, it still has substance. It's still the real thing. And I've been here now for what, 30, 40, 50 years. I'll still be here. So if you come looking, come packing. I'm Jim Keating, and I'll see you on the next one, homie.